my friend Konata Edwards at Not of the Scribe on Twitter. Admit it, you also like Big Willie style.
Who doesn't? I'm a child of the 90s. Of course I love that album. Are you kidding me?
Gosh, it just makes you smile.
Yes, it does.
And you haven't noticed who's on the screen yet either.
Exactly.
I see him.
Oh, okay. I thought you'd be excited.
I saw my peripheral. I got it. Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at the camera. I'm trying to be a pro here. That is Konata Edwards, Not of the Scribe on Twitter. On YouTube, you can see his smiling face. All right, so Jim Tanner was hired as the executive director, general manager, UNC basketball. And I know you have some thoughts, some much more important thoughts than mine. But here's what I kept seeing throughout all of the stories I read, and it's in quotes, most importantly, a UNC grad. And I thought that among the dumbest things ever written, that would be at the front of the list, because at best it's an added bonus. Because if it's most important that he's a UNC grad, I'm at this point wondering, all right, are there bodies buried somewhere that only UNC grads know about how to keep hidden? Because that to me is fundamentally dumb to hire somebody simply because they went to UNC.
I'm at Adam, this doesn't make a lick of sense to me. This does not. And this is why I had to get on camera for this, because I want to make this incredibly clear for what I'm about to say.
Okay.
This, UNC has not learned their lesson. It's very clear between this and the Hubert extension that apparently was signed after they got their doors blown off after the Alabama game. They have not learned their lesson. Duke is clearly ahead in the horizon, very, very far. Mm-hmm. They figured it out. And you would think, okay, I can just copy the answer sheet of what Duke's doing, and okay, we'll be fine in a year or two. No, you're just going to continue to do your own thing, keep it in the family, because keeping it in the family has gotten you, one national championship appearance and one Final Four? That's it. For North Carolina, that's not enough. Keeping it in the family has gotten you 1-10 in Q1 this year. That's how good keeping it in the family has done. And I think the tradition that they're keeping to has become a shackle to what they can be going forward.
All right, two things about this, because I'm not sure that they're either connected or they're not. And I know your criticism of the hire is that if you look at what Duke did with Rachel Baker, her expertise was in grassroots basketball. The Nike EYBL community and brand building through that, and how that translates into NIL and roster building and retention at Duke, and also knowing that community better. Jim Tanner's experience is as an NBA player agent. He's an agent of, and he built an incredible company in Tandem Sports and Entertainment. Nobody is knocking it. So my guess is, as a pro in the industry, he should be adaptable to this. But what is the advantage of being ingrained in the grassroots part of the community that maybe Jim Tanner's going to be playing catch-up in?
Because, quite honestly, he doesn't know any of the college players right now. He might have an idea. Tandem Sports might be talking to guys that are NBA ready, but what about those transfer portal guys, those guys, the Kobe Bryas of the world that Kentucky hit on, the Brady Manics of the world that you hit on? Those guys, you're only going to really figure out through think about Malik Brown. Think about Mason Gillis for Duke. Those two guys have been basically very instrumental. Rachel Baker probably helped identify them, helped brand build, helped build the NIL to that. That is something that you're only really going to know in cultivating those relationships along the EYBL circuit. That's the advantage. Jim Tanner's going in there cold, and if they hire what is assumed to be another NBA guy, all that's doing is saying, hey, we'll get the pro guys. It's going to treat this somewhat similarly. They'll just listen because they've been in the pros and they know what everybody wants. And it doesn't necessarily work like that. You have to be able to talk one-to-one, be able to get those connections. You have to have those relationships. And thus far, Carolina has not hired anybody that has been able to build those bonds and build those bridges. And for me, it keeps coming back to, they think that the Carolina brand is going to save them. and it's not 2016 anymore. It's not even 2020 anymore. It's 2025. Right. NIL is here. The house case is here. And it feels like the building of basketball is completely ignoring that.
Konata Edwards is joining us here on the Adam Gold Show. I think people will underestimate to their own peril the difference between 2023 and 2025. We crossed the Rubicon when House came down. We have no clue what it's really going to look like. I'll say this because when North Carolina hired Bill Belichick, I said the same thing. And again, these two aren't necessarily identical, but I think there's some similarities.
Oh, there's overlap. Overlap.
For all the people criticizing the hiring of Bill Belichick and what they're trying to do at UNC football, I get it. Chances are you're going to be right. But we don't know what it's going to look like going forward. So I appreciate that they are trying something. They are investing. Let's see if they invest the right way. But again, I do think it's more likely than not that the critics will be proven correct, that this won't work, but I'm going to let it play out and we'll judge it for what it is. I've had this working theory for a while. I think I might have brought it up with you. I'm not sure I have. I think the biggest problem with UNC basketball, and it goes back, really to the end of the Roy era, is that they've been out-recruited in the high school ranks and the prep ranks by Duke, because you have to go back a long way to find a UNC recruit who came in with anything close to the star power that Duke is
Harrison
routinely.
Barnes, right?
Yeah, that's probably it. But
Harrison Barnes.
But Barnes, I don't think when Barnes came in was Barnes thought to be a 1-year player.
Yes.
Okay, he was? Okay.
He was.
So that
Harrison
would be
Barnes.
the time, right?
Yeah.
But that's a long time ago now. That's a decade ago. That's more than a decade ago. That's almost 15 years ago. Where he and Kyrie were in the same class, right? Which is
the problem with this entire thought exercise, is that they still think it's that point. They think I know you saw the quote from Pitino about a couple days ago, where he's like, high school recruits aren't going to help you. It's going to be these upperclassmen. And yes, Pitino has a point, but that's only if you can't get these young guys. If you're North Carolina, you can get these guys.
Yes.
You just have to be creative, and you have to have the people to develop those relationships with. They don't have those guys right now. And that's 90% of the problem that's going on with North Carolina. And that's why when we start talking about 1-10 in Q1 and build, a lot of this team's flaws were built in the summer when you didn't recruit, when you didn't have those bonds, when you couldn't get a Cliff Amore, you couldn't get a Jonas Adu. A lot of that partially NIL, but the other part is relationships, and they don't have those guys right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, the basis, the foundation for Duke's teams over the last several years have been the incoming freshmen, right? And they haven't always done the best job at putting veteran players around them. It looks like this year that they certainly have. Healthy Malik Brown, Mason Gillis is like an 8th or 9th guy, but versatile piece who can shoot the basketball and a great leader and a winner. And Sion James, my gosh, is he a dynamite player who has basically kicked Caleb Foster to the curb. If Sion James doesn't do that, if he doesn't emerge, then Caleb Foster's probably still playing. But the basis for this team is Flagg, Knipple, Malawak, to an extent, Isaiah Evans off the bench in what he can do. These are all freshmen, and that's where I think I'm stunned that North Carolina has become, and they're still good, but they're not.
Are they? They?
I think the two big freshmen are outstanding players. Jackson and Powell are both great players. They're not NBA guys this year, and they need to recruit at that level. You need to have at least one guy who probably isn't going to play a second year if you're really recruiting. And they don't have. I don't think those guys are that.
But I also think that they thought Ian Jackson was going to be that guy.
Maybe.
And for a little while, he looked like it. He looked similar. He looked like what Isaiah Collier was supposed to be last year. And then Hubert stuck him at the 4, and then we didn't hear from him for about 2.5 weeks. So there's a lot of this where, again, the self-inflicted wounds of the roster building come back to haunt you. They thought they had those guys. They thought they had that talent. And again, I just keep coming back to it's this arrogance that the Carolina way is always going to work. You just put Jordan's Ferrari in the tunnel and you're going to get these guys. And it doesn't necessarily work like that all the time.
Konata Edwards is joining us here, CBS Sports Eye on College Basketball Podcast. Here's the thing about, because I just read the story, James Harden is apparently contributing a lot of money to Arizona State's basketball NIL. What is this? What level of expectation should there be from UNC to get their former players involved in that? And does it matter?
It doesn't matter because, well, hold on. Let me rephrase that. For Arizona State, it should matter. For the brand of North Carolina, it should not matter.
Right.
You have deals with Coke. You have deals with Learfield. You have a bunch of national brand sponsorships. That money should be flowing in and rolling in, being able to pay whomever you like. Plus, you have the booster money. That should be more than enough. If you need to go to Harrison Barnes, you need to go to Jordan, you need to go to Anton Jameson, cool. You want to kick it to them so that they can pass the hat and build up the NIL war chest a little bit more. Okay, cool, I understand. But you really shouldn't need that considering you are probably in college sports, you're a top 5 brand in college athletics, period, at this point.
All right, two quick things. I want to ask you about Luka playing against the Mavericks tonight, but one more thing, because I brought this up yesterday. On Coach K's Sirius XM show, he and Rick Pitino kind of mused about a potential Big East ACC basketball merger. Like, merger is probably not the right word because I don't think that's going to happen. But what kind of an alignment could ACC basketball and Big East basketball form that would in any way eat into what's going on with the Southeastern Conference and to a lesser extent the Big Ten?
I'm just trying to think of that kind of alliance and think about Dan Hurley in Greensboro or Dan Hurley in like Atlanta. And I'm just trying to think about him dealing with Teddy Valentine and him going, I'm the best effing coach in the sport. Like, I'm trying to imagine that and not just laugh.
Yeah.
So there's that, but I do think there's some merit to it. I just, like, for me, if you're the ACC, why don't you just go get UConn? Like, why don't you just go get UConn? Why don't you just go get St. John's and call it a day? That's the only 2 you really need. That way you justify going to Brooklyn a little bit more than you actually do.
I would never go to Brookln again. If you can't get to the Garden, I'd stay out of New York City. I'm sorry.
So would I.
Yeah.
But if you're going to go, if they're going to continue this Brooklyn experiment, it's possible they might. If you're going to continue to do it, then you might as well go get a UConn. You might as well go get somebody that will actually fill the building, someone that actually matters in New York City. Because
Duke matters in New York City.
Yes,
they filled the Garden again.
They did fill the Garden, and mind you, they sold. It was a sold-out slaughter, and we unfortunately don't get to talk about that nearly enough.
Oof.
But at the same point, like, you know what I mean? Like, everyone fills the Garden for ACC tournament, like Brooklyn for the ACC tournament when it comes to Duke. Every other game, it's half empty.
I know.
If you get St. John's, you get UConn, you at least guarantee someone's going to be there to see some of these games more than, like, I guess that's my thing, is that if you're going to talk about doing an alliance, you might as well just go get UConn. You might as well just go get St. John's and call it a day.
St. John's has no staying power without Rick Pitino. Promise.
Agreed.
None of the city schools in college basketball have any staying power unless you have one of those coaches. Jay Wright can make Villanova a thing because although Villanova is more suburb, they're more mainline than they are, Philly. I understand Villanova's sort of in Philadelphia, but it's really more of a...
It's of Philadelphia, not in Philadelphia. That's good. The way we should put that.
All right, real quick. How many does Luka hang on the Mavericks tonight?
My answer is I hope Nico Harrison has security with him. That's my answer. I hope Nico Harrison has security because that's basically it at this point.
God.
Like, he's going to put at least 45. And
Really?
that might be the lowest scoring output. We might see the lowest scoring output from LeBron James in about 3 years tonight.
LeBron might have like 30 assists.
He's going to have like 30, 35 assists, and it's all going to be have you seen the fast break stuff that they're doing already?
No, I haven't
and they
seen
don't
it
even
yet.
have the timing yet.
Yeah.
Adam, like, I can't wait for you to see it tonight.
I can't.
It is going.
Do you think, first of all, I got a hockey game tonight. Do you think there's a chance I'll be watching a game at 11:30 tonight? I'm an old man, Konata.
You're young at heart, though, Adam. You're young at heart. So that's why I have faith in you. And more importantly, you're going to watch at least the highlights. And there's going to be at least some Kevin Love outlet passes to Luka Doncic while he's snowbirding down on the other side. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome TV. I can't wait to see it. And I can't wait to see the size of Nico Harrison's security detail.
I'm glad you came on video for this. Our friend, Not of the Scribe, at Not of the Scribe on Twitter, Konata Edwards, Ion College Basketball Podcast, CBSSports.com. Thanks, man. I'll talk to you later.
Talk to you soon, man.
That was awesome.